What's up, guys? It's December the 29th, 2023. I'm with Palabasa in South Carolina. He's a Buddhist monk for 30 years. Now he's a layman. I wanted to talk about God because I get a lot of comments on my videos from people who believe in God. And in Buddhism, we don't have the idea of a personal God, but many people have a more sophisticated idea about oneness with the universe or heightened state of consciousness where you're one with this sort of mind of the universe. Other people have more of an idea of a personal God that judges you. So I have some sympathy with people who believe in God. So I'm trying to think of what kind of a bridge can we use as Buddhists to relate to these people because we don't have a personal God. So I want to discuss this with Padabasa. So welcome, Padabasa.
Yeah, hey, old Brian.
And Happy Cat welcomes you too. He wants to hear what you have to say.
Oh, that's nice. Cats generally don't have much interest in what I have to say.
We'll see. Yeah, so a lot of people believe in God, and they're not all Christians. So that idea, so how do we relate to these people? Because I have sympathy with people who believe in God.
Yeah, well, depends on what kind of God, I suppose. But as it turns out, in the last Q&A that I did, somebody asked essentially the same kind of question. So they were asking, how do I feel about Buddhists talking about God? And then he sent this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Vietnamese Mahayana Buddhist monk, I guess, who died a few years ago, I think.
Yeah.
But he used to talk about God a lot, even though he was
Did
a
he?
Buddhist.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was like number 2 most famous Buddhist in the world after the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh.
yeah, I guess so. So, anyways, he sent this quote just to give an example of a Buddhist, in this case, Thich Nhat Hanh, talking about God. And so Thich Nhat Hanh said, quote, God is the ground of being cannot be conceived of. Nirvana also cannot be conceived of. If we are aware when we use the word nirvana or the word God, that we are talking about the ground of being, there is no danger in using these words. So essentially he's talking about how, God is like the highest truth for some people, and nirvana is like the highest truth for Buddhists. It's like as the ultimate, it's like the ultimate truth. So in a way, they're talking about the same thing, maybe without realizing it. At least, like if they're advanced, like some Buddhists, like people that really don't study Buddhism much, they'll think nirvana is just like heaven. And then some Christians will think that God is just like, he's like an angry old man that lives up in the sky. He's like Santa Claus, except he wears a white suit instead of a red suit, and he's not nearly so jolly. And he's got angels for helpers instead of elves, So I mean, at the more like rudimentary level, they're very different. But the higher up you go, the more spiritual traditions converge. So that when you get up towards the top, like a very advanced Christian like Saint John of the Cross and a very advanced Buddhist. I mean, when Saint John of the Cross is talking about God and the Buddhist is talking about like the Nibbana Dhatu, like the element of nirvana, there's a lot of overlap. Or even if you get into like Vedanta, like it's one of the most spiritually advanced or philosophically advanced schools of Hinduism, then Brahman in the Upanishads is almost exactly the same as nirvana in the Buddhist texts. It's like the sages who experienced Brahman and the sages who experienced Nibbana or nirvana were essentially experiencing pretty much the same thing, if not exactly the same thing, but they're just describing it differently. Because Hinduism, it's been theocentric, it's been based on gods from the beginning, since back in the Rig Veda times. And so, they just put it in terms of God, whereas, Buddhists, they've never really had like a creator God, and so they'll just call it something else like nirvana. But I do think at the highest level, they're essentially talking about the same thing. But Christianity does have handicaps, it's like, according to the Bible, God is a he, and he gets in bad moods sometimes. He gets pissed off and smites people sometimes, and you can't really merge with God. Even St. John of the Cross, the most advanced Christians, they can't go against their own religion and say that you actually become one with God. The best you can get in Christianity, at least in Catholicism, is the beatific vision, where after you die and go to heaven, you can actually see the throne of God. I mean, that's the best a Christian can hope for, really. So it's not like a ultimate reality that you merge with, like in, Vedanta or some schools of Buddhism anyway.
So with St. John of a Cross, would his life be in danger if he talked about becoming one with God?
Well, I mean, he was in trouble with the Spanish Inquisition already. He was getting persecuted, and he was planning on just moving to Mexico and becoming a missionary. And when he finally got his final illness and died, so yeah,
Oh,
I mean, he already had the Spanish Inquisition breathing down his neck, even just for the stuff that he was saying. So if he starts saying that kind of thing, then there's a good chance he would have got burned at the stake.
I think he was around 1600 AD, and Master Eckhart, I think he was around 1100. I think he said the eye that sees God and the eye that sees me is the same eye. He had a similar kind of idea.
Yeah. So I mean, when you get to the point where you're calling that God is just ultimate reality, God is reality, then it's completely beyond this world. Like in Buddhism, this world is kind of an illusion. So I mean, once you get past all the illusion, you see nibbana, and it's kind of in Christianity, it's the same way. You get past all the illusion, you see God.
I like that. That's a good answer. So I bet you when people leave comments about God or they say I'm demonic or I'm advocating all this demonic stuff, maybe I can say something like that or send a link to this video or just wondering how to relate to these people.
Yeah, I mean, if they're just calling you a Satanist and just kind of raging at you, I don't think they're going to listen to anything that you say. I mean, so there's some ways you can do it. Like I've had back and forth with Christians, like in Breitbart's comment sections, where you just remain polite pretty much and just keep answering their, facing their accusations and pointing out that it's not accurate what they're saying. Then eventually, if they'll go through different phases, first they're pissed off and calling you names, and then gradually they're realizing that, you know, their arguments against you aren't sticking, and that actually what you're saying is something very different from what they thought you were going to say. And they just have this idea in their head that you're just a bad person because you're not a Christian, that you're just evil on purpose. So
I like that technique of being polite with people, particularly since the whole world can see the comment section. They can see their rude comment, your polite response, their response, your polite response. So if we're polite all the time and people are going to read the comments, I guess that's good enough.
yeah, you used to do that a lot, really. Like when you'd be out on the streets of Vancouver holding up a sign, and
Yeah, yeah,
you just be totally polite, and then the people would just be freaking out and spitting on you and attacking you and stuff,
yeah.
and they're just demonstrating themselves to be moral inferiors by doing it, while thinking that you are the moral inferior, but they're so clueless that they're actually by far more morally inferior, and they don't even see it.
Yeah, I always had one eye on the video camera, think, well, how is the audience going to perceive this? So it doesn't make sense for me to get angry at them. I'll just keep being polite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've kind of lost the thread. What were we talking about before we got started
Yeah,
on that?
how to rate the people from a Buddhist view about God. I like this. I like what you said, that think of a fundamental reality or fundamental state
Yeah,
of being.
the absolute, the
Yeah, things like
highest there is, the highest truth.
yeah. So if they want to have a God, fine, but think of it in terms of what is the absolute, or perhaps it's beyond naming, or perhaps putting words to this ultimate reality.
Yeah. Although, I mean, if they believe that God is a he, and that, he has a chosen people, or he has, he loves this but hates that, he hates it if you do something, that he says you shouldn't do, or that kind of a thing, then yeah, I'd say that they have too primitive of an understanding of God for you to really, talk sense with them about trying
Yeah.
to find some overlap, trying to find some agreement between the two systems.
So I guess with people like that, I can either just be polite in the comment section, or I can always just delete their comment if they're really rude.
Yeah, I mean, if they get really outrageous, they're just raging against the Buddha or something, probably better just delete that.
Yeah.
Although from the Buddhist point of view, I mean, they're probably just they're gonna go to hell even though you don't, you shouldn't be telling them that really, unless they're a Buddhist too. I mean, there have been like there's this one guy. He's got a YouTube channel that's way bigger than yours or mine. I'm pretty sure. And we did a video about this. He's the guy that was saying that Mahakassapa murdered the Buddha.
Oh yeah, we did that
And
silly
it's like,
conspiracy theory.
I mean, he better be right, because if he's wrong, I mean, he's just like slandering an arahant, slandering this advanced saint. And
And
I
he
mean,
is wrong. He is wrong.
yeah, and if Buddhism is correct, then he's going to go to hell for that. And
Yeah.
some people just don't care. I mean, they're just like, they just rush in where angels fear to tread.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't think of if there's anything else to say. I think you hit the nail on the head with your answer. Anything else we can add to that?
Oh, with regard to what exactly? Just like God versus Nibbana?
Yeah. And how to relate to people who have a strong belief in a personal God, or even an impersonal sort of nature of reality. Those are people we can relate to. But yeah, like what is comparing Nibbana to God, talking about that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, you can't really talk sense to people. I mean, even the Buddha didn't like convert everyone he talked to Buddhism. I mean, some people, they're just set in their ways, or else they just don't get it, or they're just got too much dust in their eyes or whatever. So it's sort of like trying to talk sense to a leftist. I mean, you can talk and talk and talk to your blue in the face, and I mean, they're just completely locked in. No amount of facts or reality is going to change their point of view. Like leftists in America, I mean, there's still almost half the country would vote for Joe Biden, which is just kind of amazing, really. I mean, he's obviously corrupt and senile and feeble and I mean, a lecher and just all this weird stuff, and
But he's
they
not
don't
Trump.
care. Yeah, that's it. I mean, they don't care. They don't want to hear it. It's like they're locked in. It's like their favorite team. It's like someone is just like a fanatical Clemson fan or something, or whatever the team is. It's like their team. I mean, they might lose games or something, but they're a diehard fan. They're just going to follow that no matter what, because that's just the way it is. They're raised in a family that was fans of that team or whatever, and it's going to be the same way with politics and religion too. Is just some people are just locked in, and they're not going to change their point of view, because some of them, like Jehovah's Witnesses, I mean, they're afraid they'll go to well, they're not afraid they'll go to hell, because Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in hell, but they think they'll be cut off from God, even from listening to somebody else, to some other religion, just trying to explain it. It's like I've had Jehovah Witnesses come and try and convert me, like when I was a monk living in a monastery in California before I went to Burma. There's
Wow.
this Jehovah Witness. They always come in pairs, but one of them was always the same, and he'd come and visit me once a week and he'd say, "Let us be open minded." And he'd be giving me all these Jehovah Witness pamphlets and stuff. And I'd try to give him like a pamphlet on Vipassana meditation or something. And it was like I'm trying to hand him like a demon possessed snake with rabies. I mean, it's like, he won't
Let us be
he
open
won't take
minded,
it.
he said.
Yeah, let us be open. Let you be open minded enough so that you can reject your own point of view and accept my point of view, and then stop being open minded.
Yeah, I
Essentially, what
think
it pronounced to.
you're right about people with too much dust in their eyes. Like the Buddha said that too. No point in trying to preach to people. So yeah, I guess that's the attitude I should have with comments on Bitchute. I'm not going to have to argue with these people. Be polite and just move on.
Yeah, well, at least at the very least, you can sort of be an example to like outside observers of both sides, and they can decide for themselves which side is the wiser side.
Yeah, and I care about people. I mean, I care about trolls. I mean, they're human being. They have a future, and I don't want them to take a lower rebirth. At least I care about them.
Yeah, well, I do a little bit of trolling myself, but still, I'm not going to be like bashing and sneering away at a saintly person.
You also made me think of flat earthers. I've made a few videos criticizing the flat earth. Even made one about now I have a PhD in earth is not flat studies. So they're the kind of that example of the religious zealot. won't listen to reason. It's like a strong religious belief in the flat earth. So I get these all the time, dropping comments on all my
Yeah, I
videos.
mean, it can be just about any kind of idea that some people will just latch onto it and just be completely rigid.
Yeah, so I guess wish them well and be polite with them and not engage too
Yeah.
much, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it depends on how advanced your understanding of God is, because I mean, at the highest levels, it's God is not a he. God is just like an it. It's like the ultimate reality.
Yeah, like in Nibbana, you could describe it as an element, I guess. You couldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, Nibbana Dhatu is the element of Nibbana.
Is that from the Buddha himself, or is that the Abhidharma,
I
Nibbana
think that'd be
Dhatu?
like the commentarial tradition. I'm not sure if Nibbana Dhatu is actually mentioned in the suttas.
Yeah, yeah, I was
But I
wondering.
mean, even when it's not mentioned in the suttas, nibbana or nirvana in the text has like two different meanings that kind of overlap. I mean, you've got the ethical, like the state of becoming enlightened, the blowing out. That's what nibbana means, or nirvana is blowing out in like a candle flame or something. But also there's like the underlying ultimate reality. And there's lots of texts that are talking about, the the deathless state, where the sun doesn't shine and the moon doesn't glow and the stars don't twinkle and earth, water, wind, and fire gain no foothold and all that kind of stuff. So it's like a metaphysical state, it's essentially ultimate reality, the highest truth, the highest reality. And I think a Christian would at least agree that God is the highest reality, even though they might have kind of a simplistic understanding of God and still think that God is essentially a giant man in the sky.
Yeah, think of, at least I can say that you think of this as your highest reality. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Ultimate truth.
Yeah. So anything else on God versus Nibbana, no God?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I use the word God sometimes. Like if you're trying to explain Buddhism to a Christian, I mean, you got to use terms that they'll understand. You can't just use polytechnical terms that they don't know the meaning of it. So, I mean, you could say that nirvana is essentially like the spirit of God that just fills. It's just everywhere.
Well, that's good to say that. Yeah. Take them one step at a time.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta use skillful means, like the Mahayana Buddhists say. And the Buddha himself, I mean, if he's talking to a Brahmin, he'd use Brahmin terms, and he's talking to like some like materialistic philosopher, which they did have in the Buddha's time in ancient India. He'd use materialistic philosophy terms. He'd use terminology that, I mean, that he's not just wasting his time saying something that they're going to reject right off the bat. That you got to use their own lingo.
Yeah, and he would redefine their own words into Dharmic meaning. So that's a skillful means.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess I can't think of anything else. We could wrap it up. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but one thing I would say is that, I mean, I do have a certain respect for Christians. I mean, um, they're they're kind of following along with, the normal tradition, but at least they're trying to be good people. They're taking it seriously. At least a good Christian does, and I got respect for that. At least they're trying. They're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, I've always felt that way about Christians, but I find on my Bitchute channel, I get a lot of flat earthers, and some of them are Christians who believe that there's a dome, although the Bible doesn't say there's a dome over the world. So I'm getting a particular type of flat earther Christian. So I realize this is not, most Christians. I understand that. Yeah, I've always got along well with Christians and had that same kind of respect for them. They have good ethics.
Yeah, you get the full spectrum on BitChute, and it's generally the lower end of the spectrum that makes the most noise.
Yeah, like we were talking earlier about YouTube. I wish I was on YouTube. I get perhaps more mature comments on YouTube. Yeah, but BitChute is it's good. It's a truth of channel. People who have been censored off of YouTube are on BitChute. Sure, you are getting vital truths on BitChute, but I guess you get perhaps a jaded population there. Are really fighting against evil in the world. Some of them are jaded. Like it's not good to just be angry and hate everything that's bad in the world. There's that type of people in BitChute as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, anger creates more anger, and hatred creates more hatred.
Yeah, I'm not into that. Well, I appreciate this, Panabas. It was great getting together with you again. Maybe we can get together in a few more weeks. We got some more topic ideas.
Yeah, that's good. I'm up for that.
Very good. Well, we'll be in touch. Thank you kindly.
Okay.